Hey, everybody, once again, welcome back to the one, the only Lead Culture with the one, the only Jenni Catron. So excited to be here with you. My name is Trey McKnight, and I have the honor and privilege to sit in the seat once again and co-host. Really, I just get to sit in your shadow, Jenni, and just learn
Not
from
true.
you. I can call myself a co-host, but really I'm like an apprentice host
Oh,
is how I would
whatever.
like to position myself here. Is that okay? Can we do that?
I mean, you can say that, but it's not really the truth, Trey, because everybody knows you're like you just got done co-hosting the Global Leadership Summit. I mean, like
Yeah.
you are on stages in lots of places co-hosting or co-hosting, and you host your own podcast too. So, I mean, you probably have a lot more hosting experience than me. Let's be honest.
Well, I may have the hosting experience, but you've got the wisdom. So that is why we're gonna dive in and give the people what they want today. Because we're
I
going to
love
learn
it.
about how we can lead better in culture and teams, and you have all the answers. Is
Oh,
in my
that's a lot
book
of
as far as in
pressure.
my mind.
That's a lot of pressure. I like to think I have all the answers, but it is definitely this, as everybody knows who listens to the podcast regularly, leadership and culture. I can never learn enough. I'm always
That's true.
learning,
Yeah.
studying, asking questions, just
Yep.
trying to make sense of how do we lead well and lead great
Yeah.
teams. And
Yeah.
so I love the conversation, and hopefully bring some value from time to time.
Absolutely. Well, I truly believe with all of my heart that you're going to bring a ton of value today. And it's great that you mentioned that, we're constant learners in this space. When it comes to leadership, when it comes to culture, we're constantly dealing with people. And as you and I have talked about before, we say that people are going to people. Anytime
That's
people
right.
are involved, how we lead them will constantly change. And so it's important for us to stay as hot on these topics as we possibly can. And really today, even, I think what we're talking about is going to be a lot of great insight on how we can invest in our teams in the
Yeah.
best way. That I think when you raise that question, at least among leaders that I talk to, there's always the question of how can I do more? Some that are doing a great job on it, and then others who are just like, I have no idea where to start or how to start.
Mm-hmm.
We're paying them well.
Yeah.
So what else do I need to do in order to take care of the people who work on my team? And so we're going to dive into that a little bit today. Just to kind of set it up, I would just love to ask you, like, what are some of the challenges, I guess, that you've seen when it comes to leaders investing in their teams?
Yeah. This is a conversation, and you know this as one of the coaches with the Foresight team. It's like we're bumping into this all the time as we're serving and working with leaders, in that the pace of change inside of organizational life just is relentless. And
Mm,
the information in the last couple of years has continued to, the data has been, talked of all the shifting that people are making, the great resignation, the reshuffling, the people making different decisions about their work. And I was on a call with another leader earlier today, and talking about the places organizationally where she's feeling the pinch points of staffing. And
mm,
she's like, I go to restaurants and you experience the short staff, like there's tables open but there's not enough wait staff, or there's not enough
right.
cooks, or whatever it might be. And you see it in like your practical things you do day in and day out. But then in some of the organizations that we lead, we're starting to feel some of those pinch points of staffing, of we've got these
Mm,
projects we need to do, and we might have lost a key staff member who had the institutional knowledge, to do that thing.
yep.
Or
Right.
we're trying a new initiative and nobody quite knows how to do the thing we want to do, and so we're trying to figure that
Hmm.
out. And so so many leaders are feeling this. And so there's that piece that's going on, of we're just kind of playing like organizational whack-a-mole in a way, right? Of
Right.
like, okay, what's the next issue? What's the next issue? That's probably an
Yeah.
outdated like game. Like, maybe, I don't know if every generation gets that, but that idea of like, there's every time you get something under control, something else pops up, and you're just
Yeah.
constantly like, just smacking at the
It's
things, trying
constantly
to.
reactive. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
And, I talked about this. I might have talked about it on the podcast a while back, but I definitely wrote an article about it, of the need for us as leaders to move from reactive to proactive. And that, you
Yeah.
know, COVID, now 2+ years ago, pushed us to reactive mode. And it
Yeah.
has been a relentless fight to get out of reaction, which
Mm,
was always a challenge for leaders, just because of the nature of organizational life. But the last couple of years pushed us so much into having to be reactive that anything that's proactive is a fight for. And that's where I think, to finally get to your question, that's where I think the leadership development thing is becoming such a challenge for leaders, is that we're just grateful to have people in seats. Like, we're just grateful to have staff. We're grateful, okay, we're paying them, they have a job description, like the basics are covered. I don't have enough margin to think about how do I actually intentionally develop them. But here's what we're seeing is more and more, I'm seeing senior leadership frustrated because that next tier of leaders don't have some of the skill set that they expect or hope for from those leaders. And it's usually some of the practical leadership development skills, like having hard conversations, knowing how to have a one-on-one meeting, leading meetings effectively, good self-leadership, just some of the fundamental, like conflict management, just basic leadership skills, but leadership skills that you can catch some of it, but you really need to be intentionally taught some of these things. And I think it's kind of sneaking up on some senior leaders that their next tier of leaders don't necessarily have those skills. And part of the reasoning for that is they might have promoted somebody into more responsibility, and again, grateful that they filled the seat, really believe in the person, really excited that they're in the role, but then they're recognizing, oh, that person's lacking some skills to help them succeed in that role. So now I've got this leadership gap. And so that's coming up a lot. I don't know, I may have gone way off from your original question, but that's
good.
I'm glad we're seeing.
I'm glad you said that, because that does raise another question for me, just as you're talking. Maybe we back up a little bit and talk about, where do you start as that senior leader when you have a position or many positions to fill? What's the greater importance? Is it we've got to fill these seats, or is the greater importance we can hold off for a little bit and wait until we find the right person for blank seat, somebody who maybe comes a little more seasoned with some of those basic skills? Or is it more important to get them in place and then say, okay, now we've got to coach you into where you need to be, even though you may not quite be ready yet?
Yeah. Oh, this is a good one. This is a good one, because it's kind of loaded in my opinion, and I want to hear yours, your perspective on it too. It's maybe a little both and so part of this goes back to that reactive versus proactive. Ideally, we have a I want to say system, but system's going to make it sound too complicated. We have intention in how we develop leaders inside of our organization, and we're consistent in that constant development, so that then if I promote somebody up who's not quite ready, but I see potential in them, I see giftedness in them, I've already been investing in their development a little bit, and then I'm putting them into the position with the understanding that they're not quite ready, but I know we already have a muscle of leadership development that will keep developing that person to make sure that they can succeed. We're going to give them the best tools they can to succeed. So, so there's that. I think in some cases, if so you're constantly trying to manage is it more detrimental to the team or the organization or to the mission if I put somebody in this seat and they are not ready for it, and it actually creates more damage? And again, damage might be a harsh word, but you're looking for what's the ripple effect of their influence or their leadership. Like, if they haven't already demonstrated some understanding of the significance of leading others, because again, we're kind of making an assumption that if they're moving up into more leadership, then they have responsibility for leading other team members or other volunteers. Then we're making an assumption that they've demonstrated some level of interest and competency for leading others. So if you don't think that individual really understands what I would say is the sacredness of leadership, then I think it could do more damage to promote them. If they hold the value of the significance of leadership, then put them in there and equip them. If they don't hold
Yeah.
that value, then I'd probably wait. That's probably the simple way I would answer that. What
I
would you add,
love
Trey?
that. Yeah, I would. I mean, to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, because as I think about this, it's basically what you said. In if I could bring it kind of how my mind makes it work, it's the element of coachability.
There you
It's
go.
somebody who has um,
You said that
a
so much more
demonstrated
succinctly.
well, it's just it's just because I have a simple mind and I have to be able to whittle it down to where I can actually understand it. So
No, I love it.
but I think in my mind, that is maybe one of the most critical pieces of anybody who's going to sit in leadership. And it goes back to what we started the conversation with
Yeah.
is the thought that we have to be learners. We have to be in any seat that would require us to lead others, any seat of leadership, we have to be constant learners. And I think that those who show or have demonstrated their ability to be coached
Mm-hmm.
by another leader, by other people outside the organization, who are constantly pursuing better for themselves, even though they may not be ready to sit in the seat. If they've shown they can be coached, that's a person I think that I would probably go for in a quicker sense than somebody who may be really established but may not be as coachable.
I love that. Yep. Yep. It's the posture and the attitude, right? It's that
Yeah.
and there's a values alignment in that. Of course, we talk so much about values, but
Mm-hmm.
I'd be quicker to put somebody in a position of leadership that values what's important to us organizationally.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's probably easy for me to say that because, of course, leadership would be something that we highly value
Yeah.
in this organization. But yeah, I love that coachability factor because then
Yeah.
we can teach them. We can teach them. We
Yeah.
can equip them with the skills. Now that goes to some of what we're talking about is then it's the onus is on us then that have more senior leadership responsibility to say, do we have systems, process, mechanisms, something that helps intentionally develop our team? And I think that's where we might have the intention, but do we have the follow through? And that gets us in trouble sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. And I think too, that communicates something to the prospective leader on whether or not they should accept such position. I know that if I'm vetting whether or not I'm going to say yes to something, it is okay. When I step into this position, is there going to be some way that I can continue to be coached within this position? What's the expectations you have of me? Are you going to take the necessary steps to invest in me? Obviously, I take ownership in my own growth, obviously,
Right.
but what are you going to do on the flip end to make sure that I have opportunities to grow?
Yeah.
That you're going to allow me? Are you going to give me a short leash, or are you going to give me a little bit longer leash and allow me to go out and fail just a little bit and then reel me back in and say, okay, this is where we could have done this better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, whatever that looks like, as you said, from systems and processes and those kinds of things. So I think that when we're thinking about investing in people, obviously you want a return out of your investment, but also you want to make sure that the investment is going to be a sound one. And so in order to do that, we speak, I think, confidence into people and trust. Again, going back to those values, to hopefully communicate to them that this is a good place for both the organization and for the person themselves. So how do you do that then? I know that you probably have. So I know this about you. You don't take a step into something without having some handlebars you can grab onto. So when we think about placing somebody who is coachable into a position where maybe we've got to go back a little bit and say, I want to make sure you have the basic skills for leadership, because maybe we're putting you into something that you aren't quite ready for yet, but we see potential in you. So I want to make sure we're investing that in you. What kinds of things are you focusing on when it comes to investing in your staff? How do you think through that? And then what are maybe some practical ways to lead them down that path so that everyone is growing and benefiting together?
Yeah, I think the first question in that, Trey, and it's funny because for me, I actually take this back to the first company that I worked for out of college was a record company in Nashville. What I didn't know then that I now see is that company had a phenomenal leadership development strategy. Like they had leadership development training, like anytime. I mean, there were constantly like skills training and opportunities that were just a gold mine. And I didn't know as a 20-something leader the gift that I had in that company. Like, I mean, so what it did is it established in me the priority of that investment. Okay. So, to me, it was just like, this is just what you do. So then I went into the next role that I had, which was executive director at one of the large churches in Nashville. And I was like, well, that's just what we do. So I came into the organization going, okay, in our all staff meetings, how am I investing in my team? Now, our all staff agenda was, we had the practical stuff that we had to talk about, all the nuts and bolts and just, the things happening inside the organization that everybody needed to be updated on. But we just started out with it might have been a 10-minute, just little nugget of something that I had read or studied and thought would be helpful for the team. Sometimes we would take an extended all staff and we'd watch a video, and learn something together. And this was back before we even had as many resources at our fingertips as we do now. I'll date myself a little bit. Like, I was going and getting DVDs and playing DVDs on a screen in the conference room, right?
What's a DVD?
Yeah, exactly. But I was like, okay, I don't have to come up with everything. Like there are resources, and I just had to be intentional to make a little time for it. And so that's the thing that I encourage leaders, because here's the challenge. Most people will think, oh, we need a leadership development plan. So I need a leadership development director, and I need a monster budget to do it. And I need all of these things. And for most small to medium-sized organizations, that's overwhelming. And they stop. Right. They just stall. They're like, well, until we can get a staff person for this, or until we can get, a big budget for it, or somebody can build a plan, and we just stall out. My encouragement to people is just start somewhere. Like just share what you're learning. If you just did that as a leader, if you took 5 minutes every staff meeting and just said, hey guys, here's something I read this week that got me thinking.
Yes, that's so good.
Let's talk about that for a minute. What do you think? Because here's what I read. I don't even know if I agree with it, but here's what I read. Or, hey, this really hit me. I'm really struck by this. Even our coaches thread today for the Foresight team, I shared something with the coaches of like, here's something I heard this week that's really got me thinking. And it's changing my perspective. I was going to say,
you're really good at this. Yeah. Right? You do this with us all the time. Yeah.
And it's habit, right? It's habit of making it intentional to say, hey, whatever I'm learning, I'm just sharing that with the team, and it becomes learning for all of us. So that's where I think sometimes we overcomplicate leadership development, but then we can get a little more intentional, right? Like we can get a little more intentional with, all right, every year, this is one of the things that I've done. And actually Foresight is working on a new training that we're going to roll out here in just a few weeks, where we're taking some of the most common leadership challenges that we hear, and we're creating a 6-week training cohort to walk leaders through these fundamental skills that we think every leader needs. Especially like that, if you've recently stepped into more leadership responsibility, like this is like core curriculum we think every leader needs. Well, I did that at a number of the organizations that I was a part of, that I would say, hey, you know what? What are the handful of skills that I feel like our team needs some development in? And then I'd go find a book, or I might find a speaker, or I might find somebody on staff who was really passionate about that particular topic. And then we'd map out a calendar for 6 months and just say, hey, once a month at staff meeting, we're going to cover one of these topics. And again, find somebody on the team who's really passionate about that topic, and tell them, hey, would you champion this teaching, this training for our team? Or you pick a book that you've read on the issue and you really think this is a fabulous one. You buy the book for everybody, and then you read and study it together. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, but beginning to do this consistently starts to develop a leadership culture your team feel invested in, and then you can get more sophisticated as you go. But Trey, I'd love to hear, what are some of the things, because you're doing this with your team as well at Orange, like what are some of the things that you're doing from a leadership development standpoint that is working for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is going back to the basics. I love that you said what the key thing there was, when you think about, okay, what is it that my team needs? What are the things that maybe they're wondering about or they're struggling through? Maybe they're a little bit green in certain areas. What are the things that they need to know from a basic level, basic standpoint? You didn't say, okay, well, I'm going to go teach them about this and this and this. First thing you said was, I'm going to go find a book that maybe addresses this. I'm going to go find a person that maybe is really passionate about it, or use the word champion. I love champion is such a good word. I love that word. You find somebody who can champion that, who can run with it, because I think what that does is it not only gets outside of your own brain.
Right.
It encourages, there to be other resources, as you say, that you involve in the process. But then two, I think that communicates to that person, hey, I trust you to run with this, which then you allow people to thrive in such a way that's so much better. And that leader is going to learn something through that process, because now when they have to own it, it's not just being told this is what you should do. They're now actually having to generate that information and then go and find their own resources so that they can share those with others.
That's exactly right.
So I think that's a really important piece. And that's kind of how we're approaching that at Orange. When I think about, we've got 130 or so in our organization right now. There's no way that I, as the culture and development guy, can be intentional and specific with every single person in our organization.
Right.
But what we can do is we can say, hey, we're going to focus on our handful of people. We're going to focus on our managing directors. And so there's about 20 of them. And we're going to do everything we can to continue to invest in that group of people right there, with the hopes that as we say to them, hey, I want you to go and run with this particular thing and teach that to this group here.
Yeah.
And I want you, another person, to go and grab onto this piece, because I think that you've got some passion around this. I've seen this, the way that you work with your team. You're really, really good about creating great culture on your team. You're really, really good about how to have hard conversations, because we've talked about that a lot. So can you just break that down into some bite-sized pieces and share that with this group of 20? And now what that does is it allows that group to develop some synergy, to develop some trust, to develop a culture of, we're going to help each other out because we're all in this together. And you hope that then they take that piece and duplicate that in all of their teams. So now when they break outside of that room and outside that group of people, then they're going to their teams and they're doing the exact same thing. So they're saying, hey, my group of 5 or my group of 10 or 20 or however many that you've got, I'm going to do the exact same with you. So they're going to grab person A and person B and say, hey, this is something that I would love for you to lean into with our team. And then that goes on and on and on. And before you know it, you've now got this exponential growth of culture in whatever way that you want to shape it, that moves everybody into a greater sense of how they connect with values, a greater sense of how they work together, and a greater sense of trust, a greater sense of growth. It's like it starts to bring this synergy across the board. Now, this takes time.
Yes.
But backing up, when you start with that, just the idea, you ask the question, and then you choose a small group to start with. And then I think it blossoms from there. And so that's what we're seeing. We're in the process of doing. It's not easy.
Nope. Yep.
But it is simple.
That's the thing. I often encourage, and I have to remind myself of this because I love to overcomplicate things too, but simple and consistent. So what is simple that I can consistently do? Because over time, the compounding effect of that is going to be significant, right? So it's like I said, that I can simply share an article or a podcast or a book in staff meeting once a week or once a month, whatever your rhythm is. And as long as I do that consistently, I'm communicating to the staff that we value learning, we value leadership development, we value getting better. So I'm communicating that value just in the doing of that thing every time. And then, like, I love what you said, because we're also communicating belief in the other team members by tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, I'd love for you to teach on this because I love how you modeled this with your team. I mean, who doesn't love hearing that? Who doesn't love being acknowledged for something that they're doing well in their leadership? So lean into that and because then what you're doing is you're fostering peer-to-peer learning, which is gold, because like you said, the trust and respect that happens within a team. And when, another team member is learning from another peer, they're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that person had so much passion and interest in that topic. It was really fascinating to hear how they think about, whatever that conflict management and how much they've read and studied on that. And you know what? I do realize they're really good at like just addressing hard things in the right way, and so there's just so much that happens in team dynamics. So it's funny, like we call the podcast Lead Culture because they go so hand in hand. The leadership development piece and the culture piece, like when we're intentional in the development of our leaders, one of the byproducts of that is we're building a stronger culture.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really good. I know that you have written several books, and one of them you speak to leadership within the heart and the soul and the mind and the strength. So maybe just touch a little bit on that as it pertains to investing in our people. How do we invest in people through the heart? How do we invest in people through the soul, through the mind, through strength?
Yeah. I always come back to this framework, and Trey, you and I've done a number of episodes on the 4 dimensions before, so folks can go back and listen to some of those too. But that framework always grounds how I think as a leader. And so when we're talking about leadership development and investing in our staff, coming back to those 4 things of heart, soul, mind, and strength, I just feel like help me stay in balance as a leader. So when I think about, okay, investing in my team from a heart standpoint, the relational side of things, it is that I would be, I would not be as a strong leader if I'm only focused on the tactical skills my team need. There's also like the relational connection of, hey, how are they doing? What's going on in their world? What's going on in their families? And part of how I develop my team is also paying attention to like, how are they doing? Like what's going on with them? And so, so the practical side of leadership development from a relational side is just slowing down to see people and being intentional to connect. And
that's good.
And so when I'm thinking even leadership development, I'll give you an example. We get invited to come in and do workshops with staff teams all the time. And I mean, that's one of the primary things that we do at Foresight. And people are hiring me with an expectation that I'm coming in to facilitate this workshop on culture or leadership development or some, and they're mostly expecting me to just lead with mind, which is the strategic part of like, come and deliver the stuff we need to deliver. But I will always start with some fun conversation, question, activity that gets us relationally connecting first. And you're brilliant at this because this is so how you're wired as well. But it's like an exponentially different experience. Like I'll get feedback often of like, how did you connect with everybody so quickly? Like everybody trusted you. How did you get them to open up and actually like have the hard conversation? Because, when we're going in talking leadership development or culture, sometimes we're stepping into messy territory because a lot of times we get called in when culture's not as healthy as we hoped it would be. And now they're saying, hey, Foresight, come and help us kind of, unpack this. So we come into sometimes very touchy conversations, or maybe I'm working with an executive team and they've been at odds a little bit. And so there's lots of tension on the executive team. And we'll come in and it's always like one of my favorite points of feedback is how did you get everybody to trust you so quickly and open up? Well, it's because we start with relationship first. We start with, how can I connect? How can I see people for people and relationally connect before we dive in? So that's a big piece. The spiritual component, the leading from soul, is that awareness that as a follower of Christ, there are values that need to guide how we interact and how we show up as a team. And so that if you're leading a staff team, that spiritual sensitivity to, hey, how's the team doing? How are we doing? What's going on with us? And of course, if you're in a context where you can be overt about your faith, it's a faith-based organization or a church, then we would think that would be obvious. It's not always obvious. Sometimes we just race to the tactical stuff and we don't actually just connect for a minute around the spiritual. But even in an organization or a team where you can't be overt about your faith, you can be in tune to how's the soul of this team, meaning how's everybody doing? Is everybody doing okay? And what do I need to be sensitive to or aware of as a leader? And how might that inform how we lead them? For example, I was on a coaching call, and the leader that I was coaching, their team had just been through a pretty significant, unexpected loss. And we had a whole agenda of things we needed to cover. But because I knew the circumstances that were going on organizationally, I slowed down and spent a lot more time checking in on how that leader was doing and what was going on with their team than jumping into all of our tactics, right?
Yeah,
so
it's good.
As we're thinking leadership development, the relational, the heart and the soul side of things it's really important we've got a pulse on that, because then we can do the other two, right? The mind is the strategic. Okay, what's the plan we need to build for leadership development? What are those tactical issues that we need to cover, and how am I going to cover them? We talked a good bit about that. We can build the plan, even if it's simple and consistent. Like I said, we can build that plan. And then the strength side of the 4 dimensions is really that visionary side of, okay, do I know why I'm doing this? And am I communicating to the staff, here's why we're doing this. Here's why it matters. Frankly, most of our teams are hungry for us to give intentional investment. Who doesn't want to be invested in? Who doesn't want to, and sometimes we get a little feedback, oh, we got to do another training or another, we got to make sure we're doing those things in a way that's life-giving and energizing, so people want to be a part of them. But casting the vision for, this is why this matters, because we want every leader at every level flourishing. We want every leader at every level thriving. We want you to be able to give your best and contribute in a meaningful way here with what we're doing. Trey, I would love to hear, and I know we probably have to wrap before too long, but you guys just did a 2-day event with Orange and for your staff. And I'd love for you to give everybody just a glimpse of like what you guys did and just what you experienced by giving some intentional time to investing in your team.
Yeah, that's good. We are fresh off of what is really kind of the first time that we've ever done. If you don't know Orange, we do events across the country on a tour. We do a big event in the spring every year in Atlanta, Georgia. Our mission is to influence those who influence the faith and future of the next generation. So we work with church leaders and volunteers and staff and parents and anybody who's got influence over kids and over students. We just believe so strongly in the faith and the future of the next generation and how they inform each other. And so we do these events, we create resources, we do all these things to help these churches and our partners do what they do well. This was the first time in a while that we decided to say, hey, what can we do to really take a step back and invest in our team and invest in our staff? We've all walked through the last couple of years, and I think in a lot of ways we've been exhausted and we've been tired as we've continued to run at a pace that some would say is unsustainable. And this is across the board. I think we all have felt that in any industry, that you run at paces that are not sustainable, and people can take time off and they can do different things. And sometimes people leave jobs and go do something else because they get burned out, whatever that looks like across the board. But we just figured there might be value in investing in our leaders and investing in our staff. And so we told them literally for 2 days, we are not going to work. Now you can imagine the response when you tell a staff of 130 people, hey, you need to not work for 2 days. Of course, the questions start to arise. Well, what is this going to be? And why are we doing this? And, who's dying? Like, why do we all need to be in the same room? Like, we got some of those kind of questions from people just because nobody knew really what to expect. Jenni, I can tell you that being on the back end of this and all the work that went into making sure that we just said, hey, we want to make sure that we accomplish a few things. One, we want to really make sure that our people feel valued. We want to make sure that they know that the work that they do is worth it and that it's valuable. But more than anything, for this particular one, we wanted them to connect with each other. And we wanted them to know that we appreciate what they do. And so we just built all of this 2-day event around that. And I can tell you that we had a lot of probably skepticism coming in the door, as you can imagine would be in any case, when there's something that's unknown. But on the back end now, we're getting a lot of feedback already. I've gotten tons of text messages and emails from people saying, hey, thank you for doing this. Thank you to our leadership for investing in our people, just for taking the time to do that. Because if we don't take those steps back, if we don't push pause for just a second, and invest in ourselves. And it's the same from a personal standpoint.
That's
I
right.
mean, I say this all the time. I work with individuals all the time, and I say, if you're not investing in yourself, you can't bring your best self to the people and the things around you that need your attention and need your energy.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so we just did that as an organization.
Good for
And
you.
it took us kind of coming inside together and saying, we're going to rally together. We're gonna celebrate people. We gave away our some awards that were based on our values and people
Love
who
it.
exemplified those things. And you just see this sense of relief from people and saying, man, one, we're in a great place. We do great work. But we kind of rallied it around this. Who we're becoming is in a lot of ways more important than what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so, who we're becoming as individuals, but then also who we're becoming as an organization. And the only way that you can do that is to make sure that we focus on who we're becoming and that we're really intentional about that. And so it was a win. I can say that
It's so
by all
good.
means, it was a win. We'll do it again. I've not seen that kind of thing in a lot of different areas. I've worked in the service industry as a firefighter. I've been in the medical field. I've been in corporate America and sales. I've done ministry. I've seen a lot of things, and I've not seen something like that happen very often. But just to see people open up to each other and to express their appreciation for the time that was spent, that originally, like anybody would be skeptical
Yeah.
about, but coming out the other end and saying this was worth it.
Yeah.
I think that was a huge win for our organization.
Trey, that's so good. I love that story and example because there's never a good time. I think this is what
Right.
the challenge that leaders have is there's never a good time. And in fact, your team might be a little skeptical. So if you do the 2-day staff getaway, or you do the just a day-long training or event or retreat or some kind, or you just start doing it in all staff every week, and they're like, can I go back to my desk because I got a bunch of stuff to work on, right? Like they're going to be a little skeptical, and sometimes that's enough to make us as leaders question it. But I say this phrase sometimes, and it sounds a little harsh, but hear the spirit of it. As leaders, our job isn't to make people happy; it's to make them better. And there are occasions where we have to remember that sometimes part of leadership is going, hey, what do we actually need? Even if it's hard for them to see the value in it yet, it's our job to see the value in it. But it's also our job to deliver on it. So while, some of the team might have come in a little skeptical, because you delivered on it, because it was like, oh, we so needed this. I'm so grateful we spent this time together. I'm hearing this a lot from organizations that spent a lot of time working remotely, and then trying to get people back to the office was a little bit of a heavy lift, right?
Yeah.
And so team members were reluctant to come back, whether that was full-time or not. It was kind of irrelevant. It was just the coming back at all was a little bit of a challenge. And but then my encouragement to leaders was, hey, on the things that you need people in the office for, make it worth their time. Make it such that it's like, oh, being here is so critical, because the connection with the team, it's heart, soul, mind, and strength. Like it's that relational connect. It's the strategic information. It's the reminder of why we're here and why we're doing this and why it's so significant. And feeling that energy of a team together is irreplaceable. And so I think sometimes we have to remind ourselves as leaders, we have to fight for it. We have to make the space for it, because it's hard to quantify, but I can promise you, in the years that I've done leadership development and the teams that I've served with, I have never regretted the time or the resources that I've invested in leadership development. Never regretted it. Never second guessed it in the budget. Like never regretted it. And so I know we're all conscious of inflation and the market and what's happening and what do we need to be concerned about in budgets, and those are sometimes the things we cut first. And my encouragement, my challenge is, in fact, I might actually double down on the investment of my team, even in seasons that might feel lean, because the return on that is exponential. So love what you guys did there with that group and with your group at Orange, and just fun to hear some of those stories already, the response to it. So good, Trey.
Yeah. There will always be reasons not to do those things. but it takes courage to step into that and say, we're going to do it because what's on the other side or what potentially could be on the other side is only betterment for everyone involved. So it is 100% absolutely worth it, coming from a person who literally just saw it happen in front of my own eyes.
And let's be clear, you also worked your tail off to pull it off. So it's not
Yes,
like,
there
I
was a
mean,
lot of work, myself and an incredible team that was alongside. Yes, it was a lot of work, but it was
you're still
absolutely
saying
worth it.
it's already worth it. Yeah.
Yes,
So good.
yes, yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well,
Well,
Trey,
Jenny, thank you so much.
I was
We
gonna
we
say
do
we
have
probably have
to
to
wrap
wrap
it up,
up, don't we?
unfortunately. Yeah. But this is always so much fun to get to chat and just to wrestle with different issues and things that I think all of us are facing in leadership and in culture. And just want to encourage anybody listening right now just to keep going because
Yeah.
leadership is challenging. And when you accepted the role in any position of influence or leadership, it meant that we were going to have to continue to grow and continue to learn and deal with the hard things, but have the courage to step up and keep growing through that. So, Jenny, thank you. Thank you for your words. Thank you for your time. And for those of you listening, we will see you next time right here on Lead Culture with Jenny Catron. Later.